Whether it's a cabin in the woods, in the desert, at a lake, or in the mountains, seems like nearly everyone is enamored with the idea of getting away from the daily grind of ordinary life and escaping to a quiet, cozy cabin. Well, this is our version of that infamous getaway. My wife Karen and I call it the Ridge Cabin. Today I'm going to show you exactly how I built this cabin from start to finish. Hopefully by the end of this video, you've learned a thing or two about building a cabin, maybe for yourself. More importantly, I hope to inspire you to want to build a cabin in the middle of nowhere. My name is Patrick. Welcome to a special edition of Life on the Moose. The story of the Ridge Cabin really begins in 2005 when Karen and I bought 32 acres of bare mountain property 5 miles from the Canadian border. Our goal was to build a house, be living there by now, but the real estate market took a dive, so we settled on slowly building a garage that you see, and we converted it into a cabin of sorts. Early on, we built this 8 by 10 bunkhouse. The material was mostly given to us. The windows we picked up used at a thrift shop. Over the course of the next 3 years, we built a barn to house materials and equipment. As well as being used in the Life on the Moose logo, this is the entrance to our property, which we call Red Moose Ranch. Across from our entryway, this piece of land came up for sale, so we bought it, mostly to protect the investment we already made. Once we owned this property, before we even broke ground on the Ridge Cabin, we decided to put up this gate. Sometimes people will drive across other people's property without fencing or gates, and as you can see, this is pretty wide open territory. The foundation that we used in this cabin is kind of like that of a beefed up deck. We have 2 large beams that are sitting directly on steel brackets. These brackets are woven with rebar and are buried into the ground, embedded in concrete, about 3 to 4 feet. I've seen too many wooden posts rot off at ground level, even when they are embedded in concrete, so this is a very solid way to go. Flooring system in this cabin is designed around 2 concepts. One is keeping rodents away, and the other is simplicity. As you can see, OSB is underneath the floor joist. I did not put that OSB up there after the fact. I actually built the OSB on top of the floor joist in 4-foot sections and then flipped them all over. Once all the joists were attached to the beams with long screws, I filled the cavities with R21 insulation, I believe. It's not necessarily to code. This whole building did not have to have a building permit because it is under 200 square feet. The walls are constructed out of 2x6s on 16-inch centers. The rafters you see here are 2x10s on 24-inch centers. I only have about a foot overhang on the low side and over 2 feet on the high side. Although it wasn't in the original plans, we decided to add a porch. I mean, a cabin has to have a porch, right? This porch is built just like a regular deck with the hanging brackets and sits on its own beam. And that beam, of course, sits on its own brackets that are embedded in concrete with rebar. For those of you who have ever excavated anything in the mountains, you know you're going to find rock. This was no exception. The beam you see under the roof here was added after the fact also, and was just attached to the main framing with the steel bracket you might see tucked under that trim. Both posts on the porch were made from ponderosa pine. I had a fire go through several years ago, and this was a mature pine that was standing, and we milled it into a 6x6. It had a few wormholes in it. Very solid other than that, so we decided to use it, pulp the wormholes, give it a nice coat of stain. It's going to last for a long time. This praying mantis decided to help me out last September when I was doing this framing. Although 99% of this build was done by yours truly alone, I did need the occasional hand. My wife helped, of course, and there was a good long 3-day weekend when I had a few friends come over and helped me do the roof, the high stuff, the steel. They helped hold this ladder. They helped make sure I didn't fall to my death. There's Rick up on the roof right now. He loves being high up on a roof. 100% of this cabin is clad in OSB, 7/16 to be exact. Roof, floor, and walls, of course. The windows in this cabin are used, half price, perfectly fine. In my opinion, it's very hard to beat a steel roof when it comes to a cabin. They shed snow very easily, and if you're in an area where there's any chance of wildfire at all, burning ember landing on your roof doesn't mean it's necessarily going to burn down to the ground. We had some extra rolled tar paper that we used for the roof. We just used that on the walls instead of getting Tyvek or some other house wrap. And then as you see, we put steel on the bottom 3 feet all the way around the cabin. This is primarily because of snow and fire. Snow piled up against it isn't going to rot the wall, and if a burning tumbleweed rolls up against it, it's not going to burn it down either. You don't have to be a sheet metal expert to put it up. You just need some flashing here and there. Here you have flashing that goes underneath the siding over the deck, and then of course you have flashing that goes under the siding and over the steel below. One word of advice if you're going to do this yourself, just make sure you have the right screws. Screwing into OSB requires a different screw than if you were screwing your metal onto solid wood. The siding you see here is Doug Fir 8-inch lap siding. It didn't start that way. These were remnants that I bought from a company that needed a beveled 8x8. The whole cabin cost about $100 to side. We ran the steel all the way up the tall side, and then as you see, we ran out of good weather. Winter hit, and we'll finish the rest later in the video. Speaking of video, here's where this one takes an interesting turn. It was at this point in the build when I first began my YouTube channel. So from this point forward in this video, there will be actual footage of the build as it's happening. That means you'll be hearing less from me, the narrator. Thanks for watching, by the way. Thanks for liking, and I really appreciate you subscribing.
So 14 inches from the floor, I'll put a little mark there for the box. See, these particular boxes come with this little mark right here. It's a guide, so that when you slide this against the stud, it stops right at the edge of those little guides. That's meant for 1/2 inch. This wall is going to have 3/4 inch wood. So I'm going to back that off just a little bit. So staples within 12 inches from a box, every 4 feet on a run. Every time you turn a corner, you also need to put a staple. You don't want to put it in too far, or you might actually break the insulation on the Romex. Let's start right next to the box. This is supposedly a low dust product. We'll see. Trusty stapler. I do have the regular one of these old clunkers, but man, that spring is tough and these are faster. This is what I typically use for like tar paper on roofs and whatnot. I just don't want to miss, because then you can rip the insulation and then what? There's a lot of things in the construction industry that are debatable, arguable. One of them is how to put up insulation. It comes with these little flanges. Do they go inside the studs, or do they go flat on the outside of the studs? The other thing I did this morning, I brought this little piece of plywood up. That is my straight edge for cutting. It is 2 feet by 1 foot, so I know that dimension. And I did some markings right there just in case, if it would come in handy. You know, it's like, oh, okay, I need that about 8 inches. I know what it is, so I'll just cut it if I can avoid getting the tape measure. And quick and easy, we'll try to do that. I can also kneel on this, pushes the insulation down, I score it. All right, let's get to work. Craft faced. That means it has this paper on the outside. One reason I like it because it does keep the dust down a little bit. And it has these little pins right here. You see that? These right here. That's what to put the staple through.
Woke up this morning with the sunrise in my eyes. Just like a new day, a breath of fresh air in my life. I don't know how, don't know why, but I'll be toasting all my life. My boots and briefcase are waiting at the door.
I know what you're thinking. You're really disappointed. All these stupid little tags mean that it's store-bought wood. I understand, and it pains me too. I don't have enough wood to finish the entire inside, so I'm going to use this mostly for the ceiling. It's blue pine. I just couldn't resist. It's so pretty. It looks good. It's going to fit in really well. Okay. Little tip. Don't just draw a line to make it square. Use this as a stop for your saw, and this cut will be square.
In the long-form version of ceiling and wall installation, I used tongue and groove on the walls. I received a few comments about not nailing it correctly. They're absolutely right. Technically, you can nail in the groove and hide all of the nails. However, because of time, I didn't feel it was that important. You can barely see these nails, and I'm happy I did it this way.
My number one piece of advice for drywall is buy a piece of vacant land in the middle of nowhere, build a cabin on it, and then do whatever you want with the inside. I am not a drywall expert. I'm not going to profess to be. There are probably things and techniques where the pros watching this are going to say, don't do that. It's a cabin, not being inspected or permitted. That's what it is. It's sheetrock. It's pretty straightforward. Just going to screw it into the studs, mud the holes, tape the seams, mud the seams. That's about it. For all you professional drywallers out there, I apologize. Blue tape. What the heck?
I mentioned many times in my long-form videos that you shouldn't necessarily do what I do. I thought I had tape on hand before this particular project started. I was wrong. Word for the wise, don't use blue tape. Unless you absolutely have to, then you just do what you have to do.
As opposed to the shiplap that went up on the ceiling, this is tongue and groove. Surprisingly, not much difference in money, and this was a heck of a lot straighter. Okay, one thing I'm going to point out when you're doing tongue and groove, I am not going to nail the top of this board until I get the next one on, because sometimes you need to wiggle just a little bit to get that tongue in the groove where it's supposed to sit. This is not on the stud. I'm not concerned for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's never going to be any real pressure in or out. So it's not like this is going to be on a roof or a floor where you're going to have load. It's just sitting there. Number two, with the tongue and groove action, this next one is going to lock it in together, into place again. So this won't be able to move at that very tip. So it's all going to be good.
What's a cabin without pine, tongue, and groove walls? Goes up easy. It's fun to do. It's rewarding. You make progress quickly, and it just looks great. On the ceiling, I'm using tongue oil. At first, I tried to roll it, but just thought, well, since I have to go back and brush in the grooves anyway, I just decided to brush the whole thing. Plus, you use a little less material when you brush it on versus when you roll it. It ended up looking fantastic. It certainly added an amber hue to the wood and darkened it up a little bit. For that reason, we decided not to apply any oil to the walls. In contrast, we wanted to leave those a little bit lighter.
I got some different brand of spray can texture. Worked fantastic. Worked like it was supposed to work. It was unbelievable. I didn't want to bore you through that. It was just me sitting there going, shh. And that was about it. All right, so this done. Looks good. I'm happy with it. Happy enough. Hey, see that texture? Oh, yeah, there it is.
We're going to have wood floors in this cabin, so we decided to drywall this one big wall. We wanted a little bit of contrast rather than being boxed in 100% with wood. The wood we are using for the floors in the ridge cabin come from a house that we tore down on another piece of land we own. The same land that the spur cabin is currently being built on at the time this video comes out. You can check those videos out anytime. Well, finish this one first and then check them out. These boards were used as wall boards in the old house, which was built, we believe, in 1911. As you're going to see in a little bit, these boards are going to clean up incredibly nice. They are absolutely stunning. It's a one-of-a-kind floor.
Boy, is that thing loaded up with character, huh? Few checks, but you won't stub your toe on this. You won't get a sliver. It'll be fine. Complete with a woodpecker hole. What? No one cares if there's a woodpecker hole in their floor, do they? No, I didn't think so. And you thought live edge was only trendy in the last couple of years. Yeah, this board was put on this house around 1910, 1911. You see how wide that is? Based on the entryway, you've seen the log entryway, it's in the Life on the Moose logo. We counted the rings in those logs, and that log was granted maybe 1.5 times as wide, maybe this wide. 150 years old, give or take. Think about that. Think about a 150-year-old board going into a house that was built around 1910. That means that tree that made this board was probably born around 1750. That's history. We weren't even a country yet. And this tree was living. All right, first thing I'm gonna do is just square these off, cut them to length so I don't have to run an entire board through the table saw.
By the time these floors are finished, You'll see why they're my favorite part of the whole cabin build. But they are also, by far, the most work. It was very time consuming, but it was worth it. These boards vary from 3 to 13 inches wide. I'm pre-drilling every one because the wood is over 100 years old. In a very dry climate, they're brittle. I don't want to take any chance of anything splitting at this point. There is no tongue and there is no groove. I'm simply screwing these straight down into the face of the board. I'm using black-headed screws, and they almost disappear with the other natural Mars in the wood. As you can see, I'm using rolled tar paper for a vapor barrier.
Are you telling yourself right now, hey, I'm gonna go find an old house, tear it down, save the wood, build a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and for the floor, I'm gonna repurpose the wood and put it down? I knew you were thinking that. So you probably noticed I'm wearing this custom designed Life on the Moose t-shirt. Look at that. They're only $79.99 a piece when you order 10 of them. No, I'm kidding.
Today, we install window and door trim in the off-grid cabin, but I would be remiss if I didn't take a step back and let you know how we got here. We've all heard the adage, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Well, in 2015, Red Moose Ranch was dealt a huge lemon when a wildfire raged the property. Because of fortune and a wide fire break, the cabin was spared, but we lost nearly all vegetation, including all of the fir trees and most of the mature ponderosa pines, drastically changing the landscape. So we faced a decision to either sell and start over somewhere else or stay and make lemonade. Today's episode is about turning dead, burned trees into gorgeous, one-of-a-kind window and door trim. Today, we're making lemonade. The windows in this cabin are going to be trimmed with what I call wrap and frame. The jambs will be wrapped with about a 5-inch board, and the whole thing will be picture framed with another 3.5-inch board.
So notice I have this big gap right there. I don't like that. So before I nail the outside piece of trim on, I'm just going to take my chisel. Right there, it's good to go. Look at that windowsill right here. Pretty as a postcard, as they say.
As I mentioned earlier, this wood is taken from standing dead from a fire that we had several years ago. This wood was not structural, shouldn't be used to construct a house. I wouldn't use it. It's a little bit brittle. It has wormholes riddled throughout it. Some are better than others. It has lots of bluing. It has lots of character. Perfect for something like window trim. And this particular piece of trim is my favorite.
Okay, the heart of this thing is the Thunderbolt Magnum. It's a 100-watt solar panel kit that I got from Harbor Freight. There's probably 100,000 videos about them. This isn't a review about this system necessarily. I'm just going to set it up. This is the first time I've ever set up a solar kit of any sort, of any kind. So this is all new to me. I've just done a lot of reading and I've done a lot of watching videos on the matter. So that's where this thing starts, and from there I have a battery that goes with the kit. It doesn't go with it, I should say. It's recommended. And then I did get way overkill, probably a 1500-watt inverter, and then I got the right wire, 2-gauge to the battery, and ground wire. They both hook up to the inverter. And then I have some light bulbs. My electrical components are in there. My crimps and everything else I need for that. Sconce for the wall. This is gonna run off of the inverted power. And I got some hinges because what I'd like to do eventually is hook up those solar panels on a framework so that I can fold against the cabin. I know, again, there's been several videos, several different recommendations. I'm just going to do a hybrid and do a little bit of common sense and see what works, because the stand that comes with it not impressive. Very wobbly. It gets windy up here, and we have to make sure this thing is stable. This is all basically a long extension cord that's hooked up to an inverter. This is the male side of the plug-in that I am going to run on this wire. So this is basically the end of my extension cord. So these extension cord ends, they hook up just like a light fixture would. Hook up hot to hot and negative to negative. Just like a receptacle. Green is always ground, gold is always hot, silver is always neutral.
So what I'm doing here is just building a simple battery box I can put in the corner. It's going to have holes for ventilation. Just something to keep the dust off the battery. What you see here are brackets for the shelf that will hold the inverter. Put these holes in it so I could run the wires directly underneath to the battery below. The shelf itself will also have holes so that I can run the wires all the way through.
You see the wire going in that slot there, which is what I want. So now I just have to cut this off to length. Black on black, that will continue the circuit down the line. Okay, according to directions, this is off. This is my extension cord. Plug this in. I have a green light. So we should be hot. Let's check it out. All right, I am going to screw these panels onto two 2x6s. So here are the holes that came with the kit. Came with that little bar right there to hold all four together. But I am going to screw them to a 2x6 on the top, 2x6 in the bottom. lot of excess wire out here, but I don't want to cut it. Probably put it all in a small box or something underneath this countertop we're gonna have. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fish one through at a time, and then when I get one, I'm gonna tape the next one to it, to the cord, and see if I can just keep pulling. There you go. Just something to add some stiffness to it. Oh, look at that. I think it worked. All right, I'm gonna go pull it through from the other side. Tell me if this moves. Success. Okay, now I'll take the next one in line. Get it started in this hole. You should see that disappear pretty soon. Have all the wires tucked up. Have some wire staples, just keeping things together. Nice and tidy. Caulk the hole, keep the critters out. All right, let's go inside and plug it in. Hook the battery up first. All right, 12.6 volts, that's without the solar panels. Let's plug this in and see what difference it makes. Instantly, 13, 13.1, 13.2. Hey, it's working. Let's just power this thing up. Trusty belt sander. I will be using this belt sander to remove some of those high edges off of some of these boards down here. So there's a good example right there. I'm just going to hit the front of that and just level this edge off a little bit. I'm not interested in having this floor completely flat. I'm just going to take the edge off a little bit just so you don't stub your toe. There's probably 1,000 different things you can put on a wood floor. When I was at the store getting oil for the other wood and whatnot, the guy there recommended, he said, use this stuff, it's good for a floor. So I was just reading this. It said not recommended for floor. I'm gonna put it on the floor anyway. Ooh, that is pretty.
So I did a little bit of research on lacquer before I decided to use it. Interesting enough, the original lacquer came from the lacquer tree in China, Korea, and Japan. Regardless of where it came from or how it's made, this ended up fantastic and I would use it again. Look at those big circular saw marks. Normally you brush with the grain. Here, I had to brush with the saw marks.
Countertop. Karen and I earmarked this slab 15 inches across at the widest point. I'm just going to snap a line and straighten that edge out, put that edge against the wall. Yeah, beautiful piece of wood. It's about 2 inches thick. I think it'll work out just nice. And as far as the shelving goes, this piece right here, we're just gonna rip that, cut that right down the middle and have a live edge on both sides. And that's gonna be our shelves. So for the cabinet, we have some real good looking boards from the old house we tore down. Fill up these little wormholes here best as we can. Some of them just go through to the other side. Some of them just make their way through the green. Okay, so this is the side wall for the cabinet that I'm going to put underneath this countertop.
Rather than having the solar panels just hanging by their hinges, I decided to bury a couple of posts, attach them to the underside of the cabin, just so that the solar panels would have something to rest on when they're down. And I also wanted to attach some sort of locking mechanism for when they're down or for when they're up.
Hey, you want to hold the ladder for me? If I fall, it'll be in this bush, so it'll be okay.
Let's take a ride. I've got the perfect place in mind. We've got an hour or so to hide.
You might notice that this trim is in two different pieces. I got these boards from a crate the steel roofing came in. Cost for this eave trim? $0.
Just one more bed. Let's find a brook or stream, my friend. Who cares if we're a little late again? On to next
hell does that look like sconces and baseboard to you? I think so. Let's transform this wood. So this little light came with the solar setup that I have. Basically, I'm gonna make a box that's open on top and open on the bottom, and that'll be my sconce. Something like that. It's almost like a birdhouse, but without a top or a bottom. Everyone needs a custom railroad spike coat rack for a cabin, right? Look at that. I don't know if you can see this. These holes obviously are round holes. So what I did is I packed the sides with sawdust. And now I'm just gonna give it one more coat and we'll be good to go.
Here's another good example of don't necessarily do what I do. I had to find some way to get a groove into this wood so that I could run that wire you see there up to the sconce. I didn't have a router or any other method to do it on hand, so I just decided to use my drill bit.